Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest season and episode of Fireside with Founders and Leaders. I'm thrilled to be joined by Simon Gunning, who is CEO of CALM, or Campaign Against Living Miserably, as they are more formally known. So CALM do some amazing work helping people in crisis with their own mental health. RMG Digital have done some work with CALM over the last 3 years, and we've supported them. So I know firsthand some of the awesome things that they're doing. I can't wait for you to hear about them as well. So I get to talk to Simon not only about all the great things that CALM are doing, but how he's been with CALM for the last 7 years, and then before that, working in some amazing organizations such as Yahoo, BBC, BBH, and really taking some of that corporate drive into the things that he's been doing with his team at CALM. So sit back, grab yourself a cup of tea, cold one, whatever your choice is, and check it out. So hello, Simon. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Rupert. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. I'm very well. As I say, just feeling very wholesome, having been doing some work with you guys over at the PGA, as we were just talking about offline.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much for doing that.
No, it was an absolute pleasure. And before we dive into this, I would absolutely implore anyone to try and get involved in that sort of stuff, because it's not only you're doing some good work, but you can have a lot of fun and meet some really nice people doing it as well, which I found out firsthand.
Yes, great.
So Simon, look, I'd like you to give a brief introduction as to who you are. Obviously, you are now currently sort of CEO of CALM, or Campaign Against Living Miserably, as you are more formally known.
Yeah.
But if you can give a bit of an intro as to sort of where you've come from, because you've not always been CEO at CALM, you've done a whole host of different things in your time. So talk a bit more about the things that you've done over the last sort of 10 years, the types of places that you've worked, and then we can talk a bit more about, you know, where you've worked in those areas, and, you know, some of the things you're doing at CALM.
Yeah. Well, for the majority of the last 10 years, I've been at CALM, so it's coming up for 7 years now. Having joined as CEO in 2007, right at the start of 2007, but it certainly wasn't a career path that I expected, in that I'd been on the technology side of media and entertainment for the vast majority of my career, having started off in the music business, promoting events and then being a manager. I managed artists and producers, but then kind of did a handbrake turn, if you like, into TV, when every kind of linear rights holder was in absolute agony, worrying about the internet and what we were going to do with it. I left music and went into TV, firstly with channels, and then with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So I was running a chunk of Millionaire globally, and basically freeing up the pockets of viewers around the world by removing loose change and getting them to spend money on digital product, which was great and successful and crazy. 108 simultaneous markets we were in, and then from there I went to the white heat of Yahoo, which it's hard to really give it credence now, but Yahoo was the biggest media company in the world. I mean, to the point where I was doing a joint venture with Channel 4 from my time in channels. I knew people at Channel 4, and not least Andy Taylor, God rest his soul. He was a lovely man who ran digital at Channel 4. We were good mates, and we were so arrogant at Yahoo that my boss told me that we're not going to strike up a partnership with a local broadcaster. So I ran it across Europe. We were going to buy them. So find out a way to buy Channel 4. Like, you know, this is a publicly owned company. It's going to be quite tricky. Mind you, I suppose that's not that unusual. At least he had the excuse of being French. Nadine Dorries was a culture minister, and she didn't know how it worked. But anyway, I went from Yahoo then back to music at EMI, where again, so this was 2008 when. 2007, sorry, when the flush of the CD, the new CD market had absolutely just put billions and billions into the record business. But when I got there in 2007, that was very much all over. Everybody had already bought their CDs, and now LimeWire and various others were pirating it. So that was really about how do we reinvent IP through IP. I thought that.
Yeah.
So it was just about trying to retain some value in the rights that had been so richly paid for and jealously guarded. And then the EMI exploded and was basically sold for £1. And I went to the BBC, where I was marketing director there for things like BBC iPlayer and BBC Co UK, but then running all the digital marketing and digital product development across TV and radio as well. And then, yes, I wound up. I must have committed a lot of sins in a previous life, I guess. Ended up in creative advertising. So I was running digital parts of BBH, Global Creative Network, which was a blast and a hoot traveling around the world. But we sold BBH, and I was kind of knocking around consulting for other agencies, which is like the least sensible thing an adult can do with their life, really. They're consulting with other agencies on helping them maximise their multiples on their EBIT so that they could sell. I mean, who does that?
Yeah. Just making rich people slightly richer.
That's not a job. That's just daft.
Yeah.
And actually, not perceiving it as being anything that I ever wanted to continue doing, really. And I got a phone call from the chairman of Calm, and I was aware of Calm at the time, but not in any sort of detail, really. But I knew the chairman sort of through his wife. They'd just parted company with the founding CEO. Calm was teeny tiny. I mean, really teeny tiny, 8 people. But I went for a month. He just James Scroggs, the chair, just said, "Go on, do something decent with your life, and go and have a look at this thing, and tell us what you think about what should happen to it, because it didn't have anybody leading it." And what struck me straight away was the brand. The brand was so powerful that, and the loyalty to that brand from people who knew about it, especially if they'd been in any way directly affected by it, was like crackers, crazy. And you look at it and think, but when I was trying to sell things like, whether it was iPlayer or British Airways or Chrome or whatever it was, when you're in the sort of the game of trying to get people to change their behaviours and do things they didn't expect to do, which is basically what kind of marketing and brand work is, the value of Calm was just obvious there, even though nobody knew about it. So that was it. That's nearly 7 years ago. I went for a month, and just like the mafia.
Never look back. There you are. And so you've obviously, as you've talked about, sort of worked for a variety of different companies, different industries along the way, and now landing at Calm as their sort of CEO for, as you say, just over seven years. What was the catalyst for that change? You mentioned about being like, go on then, do some good and come and join. But what was that sort of real catalyst to drive that change and go, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do, and this is where I want to be for the foreseeable?
I figured, and I think looking at decisions that people make about their careers, I figured that I'm not going to be able to run a charity. I don't know anything about charity, and what I really found sort of an eye opener really was the amount of times I was told when I got to Calm that we can't do that. We don't do things like that in the sector. And I thought, well, what sector? I'm not in the sector. I mean, right now, because I perceived it as being a temporary thing for the first year or so. Right now, I'm in the business of trying to get people to know about this thing that is saving people's lives, albeit in a much smaller way than we are now. But you mustn't be constrained by sector or by the industry that you're in. But what I think I've probably learnt is that the important thing in any job that you're doing is once you've found something that you enjoy doing and that you're half decent at doing, don't compromise it. Don't decide, well, the people around me don't want me to do things this way. Do what you are. And so I only ever knew how to run Calm in a way that I would have done in a record company or a television company or an ad agency. And I was very pleased, somebody that I worked with at EMI, So EMI was a group of labels, and it was broken up and sold. But so somebody who was still in the record business came to visit us in our railway arch in Waterloo, where we are, and walked in and said, "Hang on, this feels like a record company. This feels like or a creative agency or something." It's like, well, that always was the idea. You want it when you've got those suicide prevention charity. It doesn't inspire your initial thinking. Doesn't inspire creativity and ambition and disruption and it's kind of the behaviours that you'd associate with the challenger brand because there are a lot of big incumbents in the world that we do. To do it differently. So all I did was just carry on doing what I was doing before, really, because I don't know anything else.
And it just goes to show, I think, that there's always this stigma is probably the wrong word, but this view that people should stay in the same sector, and people always, especially in our line of work in recruitment, we often get told, well, we'd like someone from the industry and we'd like someone from the sector, and I always see that as fairly blinkered as a view. I think it's much more productive to have someone coming from outside with outside thinking who isn't being told, no, we don't do it this way because that's just the way we've already done it. And you can then drive change in a positive way. So how did you go about driving that change then in, say, an industry that had been fairly probably insular in my view, certainly, to what Calm is now? Like you say, it's a bit more like a record label, when you look at Calm and what you guys are doing. So it's very strikingly obvious who Calm are comparatively to some of the other organizations in the same sector.
Yeah, you can get found out very quickly if you just get a poppy logo and you don't back it up. Actually, the truth of it, maybe there's something to think about for me. Actually, since it hasn't occurred to me, is that the BVI, the visual identity of Calm, actually only changed about 18 months ago, and actually that the big poppy logo, the very kind of standout way that we present ourselves, actually followed on from the work that has been developed over the last 7 years, or since in my time. And the first thing that I did when I got to Calm was basically go round town talking to people that I knew from previous industries, most notably ad agencies, and going to see everybody that I knew. And I knew everybody because I'd been in bars with them, or put my credit card behind the bar, their credit card being behind the bar, or at conferences and stuff and things like that. And I go up to them and say, right, I'm doing this thing, and you need to do it as well because it's brilliant. And the thing that stuck out for me in that month of just looking at it was the brand. And so, how are we going to try to tackle this awful bunch of facts which relates to suicide in the UK, which I kind of branded the HSNs, the holy shit numbers, because when you hear them, you go, holy shit, and then you try to think, what can I do about it? Unfortunately, one of the first people that came on and said, yeah, we've got to do something about this, haven't we, was an agency called Adam and Eve DDB, who I'd known from previous lives, and it was with them that we did the first really big creative campaign outings. And that put us into a very different communication place to anything else that was going on in either, definitely in suicide prevention, but in mental health. Nobody was doing the kind of things that we did, which very quickly escalated through other partnerships, most notably through my friend, Simon Daglish, Dags at ITV, who's the deputy commercial director there. And he totally went, shit, yeah, I've got to do something about this. So he took me, or we went together really around various bits of ITV. And then with Adam and Eve DDB and ITV, we did Project 84, which was the first big campaign we did that kind of blew the doors off and took us from being small to being midweight. And then latterly we've continued, I think, to become what we might call heavyweight.
Because I think I've certainly seen from my own knowledge of Calm over I've known about Calm for about 5 years, and we've supported you guys for probably 2, maybe 3 years coming up to, and even in that time, you've become better known amongst most people. Yeah, I think if I was to ask most people, do you know about CALM or Campaign Against Living Miserably? Most people I know would have probably said no. But now I think the vast majority of people do know who you are. And that's obviously down to you being able to bring some of that sort of media impact into what you're doing. Overall, I would suggest.
Yeah, it's not me. There were 8 now. We're 60 people now in our head office, and then another sort of 80, 90 on our helpline. So it's not me, but I think what you can do as a CEO anyway is set precedent or sort of set precedential behaviours, and there's nothing like doing rather than telling to really create change. And so, yeah, for the first bit, I was kind of pulling the boat along, not on my own. I mean, still some really good people, but only literally 8 people in total. That the people that got on board with what I wanted to do and was very fortunately backed by my board and by my chairman to do. People that weren't with me on that, just, it's cool. They left. They went and did other jobs. It's okay. But the people that were came on board, and now we advertise a vacancy and a job, and like you say, because of the reputation that we have, not for our work, we're the most awarded advertiser in the world in 2023. That's not the most awarded charity; it's the most awarded advertiser. I'm tooting our own horn there a little bit. There's a big queue. We're just about to advertise for a new head of PR and social, and I imagine there'll be quite a scrum for that, people wanting to come and work for us. And I think that's because we can now point to a portfolio of historical work which says that we do things differently, we do things with ambition and disruption, but in doing so, our sole output is saving people's lives, and that's quite a good thing to have on your CV.
Absolutely, and let's sort of take a moment then to talk a bit more about sort of CALM and I suppose your mission overall as an organisation, because there will still be some people out there who don't know about CALM and the great work that you guys do, and some of the stats that you hear around suicide are fairly harrowing. I tend to find the biggest one that it's still, correct me if I'm wrong here, Simon, but the biggest killer of men under 45 is suicide still. And that always really gets me. So let's talk about, if we can, some of the initiatives, some of the drives behind the organisation.
Yeah, well, we self-select to be a suicide prevention organisation, and there's something to me very interesting in the fact that I don't like saying that, and I feel a bit embarrassed about it, and it feels a bit weird. Because that to me just reflects culturally where we are with suicide prevention, which is that we don't want to talk about it. But however, we absolutely know that talking about it directly prevents it. What I think I would challenge people who are squeamish would be to meet some people who have been bereaved, who've lost their kid or lost their parent or a loved one, a mate, colleague, whatever it might be, and you think, I've got to do something about this because it is the single biggest killer of men under 45. I guess the sad corollary to that is that actually men over 45, other things just come along and kill them. But it's also the biggest killer of all people between 14 and 39. So it's a very, very sobering perspective when you look at deaths. That's 6,500 deaths every year. But the way that we want to tackle that is actually on a much bigger number, and in some ways a much more kind of energizing number, which is, yes, there are 6,500 deaths. For every death, there's 25 attempts. So we can come out from that blast radius a bit. Every suicide affects 149 people directly. So they come out from that, and these people are living miserably. If you're death by suicide attempts, 25 times 6,500 people affected by that, and then the rest of society as allies. So it's a public health emergency, and it's one which is affecting people's lives constantly. And so we choose that lens of suicide as a kind of a barometer on society, but we work right across the whole of what we call the continuum. So people who are perfectly happy and have always been perfectly happy, right the way through to people who are in suicidal crisis. And we want to be pushing people towards the happy end of that continuum all the way through their lives, and with all the different products that we make. So we're very much a product-focused business. At the pointy end is a helpline, which is staffed by paid, trained professional people. So it's not like a volunteer intervention, non-intervention thing. We intervene, we'll help people who are at crisis by putting plans together. But then as you go across that spectrum, you'll see products like the putting challenge at the PGA that you were working on at the weekend, like comedy events, like gigs, like football tournaments, like the best quality digital content that we can possibly make, distributed using the best quality digital tools that we can make, like our advertising campaigns. All these kind of things are products that we're trying to use to push people down to the happy end of that continuum.
And you can see you talked about some of your advertising campaigns, and I think those have been some things that have been fairly prominent in the media, and those are some of the things that they do have that sort of shock value that get people to pay attention. And again, is that something that you feel has sort of been brought into the organisation by treating it like yourselves like an agency comparatively to a charity?
Yeah, like in any good client relationship, whether you're working with a technology partner or whether you're working with an agency, whatever agency type of agency that might be, you have to have a positive tension between the client and the agency and or the business. And to me, that positive tension comes in questioning the work, but questioning it in a position of trust. You're not going to, well, hopefully you're not going to, be parting company between the client and the agency. But that trust is about questioning whether the work is as good as it possibly can be. And so we've always done that. We don't pay when we're pro bono, all of our agencies, whether that's our digital agencies, our performance agencies, our creative media or PR agencies, or product development. But we'll always be testing. We'll always say, could this be better? Can we work harder on this? That's not hitting the brief. Let's come back to the brief, and we'll work back with that partner to look at the brief and check that it's still right. But that tension is what's got us to the point where our creative output, based on our strategic input, I think is really good. We don't set out to shock. That's too blunt an instrument. We set out sometimes to make people jump and laugh. We did something with Sayat where we put a pair of 12-foot eels.
I remember, yeah.
A pair in the middle, and you can make people laugh, and that will change people's approach to things. But if in dealing with what we deal with, we have to bring people into our movement, into our mission, and you can do that by we do that by almost kind of punching the nation in the mouth, really. And the last one was the last photo, which is the most awarded campaign globally. And that really was kind of an expression of 5 years' work with Adam and Eve DDB, where we had people talk about spotting signs all the time, and what we discovered was that often aren't any at all. Now, that doesn't need to put everybody into a sense of terror, but it does mean that we need to be active and proactive in looking after each other. That was the output.
And so one of the things I was keen to explore, you mentioned over there about sort of being active and being proactive in looking after each other. So you've obviously, as we've discussed, got a long history working for sort of your media, advertising, tech companies. So the media can play both a positive and a negative part in people's mental health, I tend to find, depending on which side of the fence you sit on. So as someone who's worked in that industry before, and you still have very close ties and connections to that industry, what do you think the media can be doing to embody positive mental health amongst people?
Well, I guess there's two perspectives, really. I mean, we work in a corporate way with a lot of large organisations and help them help their teams be happier. I mean, as much as we absolutely know that a happy team is a more productive team, there are billions of hours of work lost each year to people who are feeling shit and don't want to go and either have low productivity or none at all. But that just putting a Bupa helpline in place for your staff and putting a tin on the reception isn't going to really change that. We have to talk to people in ways that they are receptive, and really adjust the kind of products that we're developing for people in the workplace. And media organisations will make lots of great claims about how they care about their staff, but push comes to shove and they care about revenue and shareholders. And that's it's a fact of life. But the two are not mutually exclusive. You look after your staff, your revenue is going to be better, your shareholders are going to be happier. So we do that. But as far as output from media organisations is concerned, we've seen just a massive amount of change. I have in the time that I've been thinking about this stuff since 2017, where I really 6 years ago talking about mental health was an outlier. I'm talking about that term is in itself unhelpful in many ways, but the sort of the Piers Morgan view was the norm. That has changed. I mean, it really has changed. That we understand that our brains are ridiculously overcomplicated organs that are developed for pack behaviours to the extent that we've got language and we can coordinate our behaviours, and that actually using that language to help ourselves and help people around us works really well. And I think that we've probably established that now. You've got really big media businesses like ITV who will allow their entire schedule to be taken over by that kind of messaging. The concern is compassion fatigue or issue fatigue, and that there are a lot of things to worry about. Of course, that in itself is bad for people's mental health. I think what we need to do is move into a greater degree of education about so what, if you're not feeling good, so what can you do about it? If the people around you aren't feeling good, so what can you do about that? And I think we've kind of established this. The principle that it's okay not to be okay. I'd actually quite like to flip that over and say, no, it isn't. It's not okay not to be okay. You deserve to be okay, and flip that into more kind of proactive behaviours as mentioned. But we are still a really long way behind on suicide prevention. And as the holy shit numbers are so terrifying, we have to get to a point where when we're working with brand partners, for example, of which there are many, Sayat mentioned, but we work with ITV and Spotify and Netflix and BMW and Beavertown and all sorts of partners, and they are bought in. But we also come to lots of media and other sorts of organisations where they love what we do, they want to be a part of it, they want to help, but can we not talk about suicide? No, that's what we've got to do. We have to get to a point where we've changed the narrative, and media can do this, but we've changed the narrative in the same way that we've thankfully changed the narrative around LGBTQ plus communities, where 30 years ago the discussions around those kind of issues were embarrassing, and portrayal of people from those communities in the media was risible. It was like stupid sitcoms, and queer and gay were slurs, and we've got past that, and it's great. But we have to do the same with suicide, because we have to be able to talk to our kids about this thing, which is a species level behaviour, and which is, according to the World Health Organization, the most preventable cause of death. And the way that you prevent is low cost or no cost. But we're too embarrassed, and we've got to stop it.
And I really like your view of sort of flipping on its head, because I always thought it's a bit shit to say it's okay not to be okay, because I think you're absolutely right. It's okay to talk about not being okay, but no one needs to not be okay. Everyone should be okay, and we want to get into a position whereby everyone is okay. And if people can start talking about it, for me, that's a big part of removing the stigma. that is talking about suicide and, making it still this thing that everyone's slightly embarrassed about, but it affects so many people.
Yeah, and I know that we're aware, aren't we, of the sort of the nuance to that phrase. It's okay not to be okay, in as much as the bit that's left unsaid is it's okay not to be okay, and to try to change that. That's the difference. Try to change it, but I think that that's that point of education where we haven't made the strides that we can, and we will. We definitely will.
And we talked about sort of the media there, but then obviously we're sort of in a digital age now, comparatively to certainly even 5 years ago. But we live in a digital world. So how do you think sort of technology help sort of change some of this sort of stigma? Because there's all sorts of things going on out there where there's lots of tech for good. There's also lots of tech for not good or bad, whatever you want to call it. But where do you think technology can play its part in helping?
Well, it's an itch that I can't scratch, really. That the greatest single expense for Calm is our helpline, and it's brilliant. I mean, it saves hundreds of lives every single year. But despite the fact that we have as I mentioned, a pool of 80 people on that helpline, with 26 working at any given moment, we can only get to half of the calls because it's really expensive. We run it really well. I'm not looking to change the way that we run the helpline, because it is efficient in that industry, but only being able to get to half of the 26,000 calls and chats that we have, be that on WhatsApp or through a website, or on the phone, that to me isn't good enough. And so we have to use digital tools to change that. Not least also because actually 26,000 is just the tip of a very deep iceberg for people that don't want to talk to someone on a phone. And there are vast swathes of the population, men, for example, younger people, where the phone app on your mobile is not in the top 10 used apps. We have to find other solutions. And I'd spent a large part of my life trying to monetize digital content, and we're not looking for monetization. We're looking just for consumption. But one of the key principles, obviously, is the limitless shelf, so that we can be serving up our content to a limitless number of people at the same time, which you can't do with a physical human helpline. You can't do it. There's a law of diminishing returns, that you could build the biggest shed in the world and put 1 billion people working on the helpline. It's just like adding more lanes to a motorway. They get full. And also your overhead is so high that actually you can't do that anyway. There's no way we can afford it. What we need to work from that product perspective with technology is creating the right content, and it is content of varying forms. And then profoundly important is delivering that to the right audience at the right time in the right place. AI is inevitably going to play a part. We invested work and money in AI 4 years ago, and then got to the point and went, no, the reason the I is little and the A is big is because it's not very intelligent, and we wouldn't trust it, the product, as far as we could take it. We wouldn't trust that to run, for example, triage on our helpline. Now, where we are is very different, and we are leaning more and more into the creation of digital tools that will be able to identify very need states, obviously respecting all kinds of data ethics and data laws, but need states in our customers, and delivering the right solutions to them, but in a digital form. And I think the term customers is important, because we don't actually use that term, I hasten to add. We don't actually call people that we help customers. But I think in this context, we have to take cues, as we've taken cues in the way that we run our communications, for example, our campaigns. We've taken cues from other industry sectors. We need to take cues from the way that the customers are consuming the kind of products that your clients are making, and fall in with that.
Makes sense, and it's definitely there's been advancements made over the last few years in AI no doubt, but it's not an easy solution or easy problem to try and solve. But I can absolutely see the value of you guys getting involved with more of it. As a bit of a parting sort of bit of wisdom, if there's someone out there who's listening to this at the moment, they want to get involved in some way, shape, or form of having a positive impact just generally around mental health and suicide prevention, what would you say to someone who's an individual who might be listening to this and who's a bit stuck as to, you know, where they can go and what they can do to really advocate positive mental health?
Well, I'm obviously going to beat my own drum. No point beating someone else's. They're all doing that.
Yeah.
So the way we talk about calm is that we're leading a movement against suicide. That we can't do it on our own, and we can't do it if we had a couple of billion in media budget. We could probably do it on our own, but we haven't. And so, there's also something heuristic about the fact that we are leading this movement, because hopefully what you'll have found with your brilliant support for us, not least this weekend, but as you've done historically, is that being a part of this movement does you good. We know, we found that 82% of men in the UK want to be the person that's there to help their friends. And this is back to this pack.
Yeah.
So in that pack behaviour, in joining our movement, in being a part of what it is we're trying to achieve, you're identifying yourself as the kind of person that believes society is better off if we exhibit those kind of caring behaviours for each other. I worked very briefly, I consulted for Bacardi Global Brand, and let me tell you, it was the most luxurious 6 or so months of my life. I loved it. But the way that they talk about Bombay Sapphire is that when people order a Bombay Sapphire at the bar, they don't say gin and tonic, they say Bombay Sapphire and tonic. Yeah. And they want to put that blue bottle on their lapel and identify as being that kind of a person. Same goes for Grey Goose. So when we're talking about being a part of our movement, we want people to be able to do that too. When you put that calm badge on your lapel, or you put on the calm football shirt, or the calm t-shirt, or the calm whatever it might be, running top, you're saying, this is what I am. I'm a part of a group that believes that looking after the people around us, caring for them, and acknowledging this awful problem in a positive, change-making way is how I want to be seen and how I want the world to be. And so I would ask people if they do feel that they want to do something, come along and have a look at what we're doing. Come along to our things, be a part of it. Just get a badge and put it on. Find out how to tackle these issues and do it. Be that agent of change. Be the person that talks about the stuff that people don't want to talk about. But do it because you know you're going to be saving people's lives, and even in the short term, you're going to be making people happier.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It really is having that positive impact of helping to save people's lives, make people's lives less miserable, and ensure that people can go about their lives in the best possible way, shape, and form. And I applaud all the work that you guys have been doing, and I hope you continue to do more fantastic work moving forwards. And I hope other people will get on board and join the movement, as you say, because it really is a worthwhile cause, and you can really feel part of something whilst making a positive impact and a real difference. So thank you so much, Simon, for coming on, talking to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing all about where you've been and where you are now. And I look forward to seeing continued success.
Likewise. Thanks very much for having me, Rupert, and thanks for everything that you've done for Calm too. It's a great thing.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. You happy with that?